Congolese afterwards have done this call, and this call has been from the Congolese. So 2010 was the international community coming closer to the voice of the Congolese people, saying that we must have justice. And why is that critical? In 1997 and 1998, during the invasion of the Congo, the Rwandan troops committed a massacre in the DRC. They committed many massacres, but the one that's pertinent is the Tingi massacre, where they went after Congolese and Rwandan refugees, and they massacred hundreds of thousands of them, men, women, and children. When that killing took place in 1998, there was an investigation already in 1998 around the crimes committed. The report was written by Roberto Garreton, the Garreton report, documenting the massacre of civilians. At that time, in 1998,
À cette période,
the people who actually blocked, the nation that blocked that report was the United States. So in 1998, evidence is
en
published that there is
1998
massacre
à
of civilians, and nothing is done. That sets the precedent that now impunity is the word of the day. That became clear that if we don't address the question of justice in 1998, there is no way that in 2020 we can talk about that. So the fact that the massacre took place, a report was published, and nothing was done about it, we are looking at 2 decades later, what is happening in justice? And this is why we are supporting the from Dr. Mukwege, calling for the creation of an international tribunal for Congo. That call is very simple. There cannot be justice without peace, and peace will not take place if there is no justice, and human dignity cannot exist in DRC if there is no justice and peace in DRC. And I think we can explain more during the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Kambale. Thank you so much for giving that history, that background, that critical lens of 10 years ago, who was there and why, and lifting their voices up today. We turn to you next. We heard Kambale underscore the genocide. 6 million Congolese died. And that number we know has continued to increase, right? Half of them were children. Claude, you sort of lived this as a child, coming through a genocide. Can you share with us a bit of your experience, your personal story, and a lens from the perspective of the other side of the border in the Great Lakes region side?
Thank you, Amira, and thank you, Kambale. And I really appreciate you telling the story of Frank Lefevre, rest his soul. He was a great ally and you know, somebody that was over 80 years old, standing outside the UN with the sign, release the report, my tax dollars are paying for this. You know, he was an amazing person, but I would be remiss also to say, we are now at the 10-year anniversary of the mapping report being released, but also Kambale, 10 years ago, there was an attempt on your life because of the work that you're doing. And I'm glad, you know, at the time we were doing the Break the Silence tours, I'm glad that you're still here and we're still breaking the silence. And we're gonna continue to break the silence and we're gonna shatter the silence and we're gonna get justice for the people. But just so that everybody understands, just so that you know, when you hear that 3 million children were killed, that 3 million died in the Congo and 6 million people died, you may just think this is a book or a movie. This is not real. I wanna share how real this is. When you live through a genocide, and I just wanna walk you through it a little bit. I'm gonna try not to be so graphic, but I survived the genocide in Rwanda, in the war. During that time, I was in the middle of bombing campaigns where people were getting killed, basically like dust, you know, bombs falling everywhere, running around, jumping over dead bodies. At one point, I was captured in my grave, me and my mother. Thank goodness there were people like those who are on this panel and those who are following who actually put their lives in danger and pleaded for my life. Multiple times, I made it. I ended up fleeing to the Congo. And so I survived the genocide in Rwanda. And luckily, I also survived the genocide in the Congo because I was rescued in the Congo before the bombing and the invasion of Congo shamefully by the Rwandan military and the Ugandan military. And there's, I have a little story for you. In the late 90s, there was this seriously deadly war and genocide going on in the Congo. It's still going on today, but 1998 to 2002 was the worst. During that time, the government of Rwanda and Rwanda's president, Paul Kagame, kept denying that Rwanda had not invaded the Congo, that it was an internal Congolese issue. And I want to dispel the myth. They kept saying this, and then in 2002, they held a ceremony. Look it up, or we can share the link. They held a ceremony to pull the troops out, Rwandan troops out of the Congo that never invaded the Congo. So the reason why I tell my story, the reason why I share my personal story is because there are people who actually deny that these atrocities happened. I lived through these atrocities. Thankfully, I survived them. You know, share my story of, you know, just this change of the human flesh and the sky covered with, you know, a big dark cloud from the bombs and the burning and everything. These are real things. These happen to real people. These are things that I saw with my own eyes. This is what's happened in the Congo. This is what Uganda's invasion and Rwanda's invasion of the Congo has produced in the Congo. The 3 million children that died are my little brothers and my little sisters. They're your little brothers and your little sisters, your children and your grandchildren, for those of you who are watching. And this is why it's important that we continue to push on Mukwege's message. In fact, not only do the perpetrators and their supporters deny that these atrocities happened, they have threatened Dr. Denis Mukwege, a hero on the African continent, a hero in the Congo, who helps women heal from brutally being, I don't want to be graphic, but brutally being assaulted by these men who have invaded the Congo. And he's done so much wonderful work especially in the Congo. He's been recognized with a Nobel Peace Prize. But guess what the perpetrators want to do to him? They want to assassinate him. And instead of that, I'm calling that we all actually join his call for justice on the UN mapping report. And by the way, what's happening in the Congo, what the Rwandan government exported to the Congo, they also kept internally. Just a couple of examples. We talked about Paul Rusesabagina, who sheltered over 1,000 people during the genocide, but the perpetrators actually abducted him from Dubai about a month ago, took him to Rwanda, and now they're accusing him of being a terrorist. The same people who have terrorized millions of Congolese are actually accusing a person who sheltered others as a terrorist. So for those of you who have seen the film Hotel Rwanda, the real life hero of that hotel, of that film, in that film, is in custody in Rwanda in the hands of those who invaded the Congo and are accusing him of terrorism. So not only does it happen to Rwandans and the Congolese, but it's egregious that one of the leading, General James Kabarebe, one of the leading criminals without borders, as my brother Kambale and myself refer to him as, because he's committed war crimes in Uganda, in Rwanda, and also in the Congo, actually had the guts to sit on TV and threaten that. And again, that is the danger of speaking out and standing for the truth, but we will stand for the truth, and we're gonna make sure that the perpetrators are held accountable. And I got news for every single one of you perpetrators, especially the leading ones and their supporters who think that there will be no justice, that they will get away with it. We will make sure, we are determined, we are gonna make sure that there will be courts to judge those who have killed the millions of Congolese people that are documented in mapping report. And lastly, so that I can close, I wanna drive home this Congo issue. There is a myth on the African continent that Kagame, the president of Rwanda, is a Pan-Africanist. Let no African, let no brother, no sister kid yourselves that Kagame is a Pan-Africanist. As Kambale explained it, he's a puppet of the West. When he commits these atrocities, it's with the support, financial, diplomatic, political, and military from the US, the UK, France, and other Western puppet masters. Thank you, and I look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Claude. Powerfully said. Powerfully said. Judy, we turn to you now. We've already touched on the horrors of of these crimes against humanity, and we know that your book has been about documenting evidence and also ensuring accountability through tribunals and mechanisms, international mechanisms of accountability. So we would love to hear your thoughts now on what is actually needed as we, as people of conscience, pursue justice in the Great Lakes region of Africa.
Thank you, Amira, for eloquently moderating this discussion. Thank you as well to Kambale and Claude for sharing your voices, compelling voices on this issue. Yes, I'll get to it. Accountability is really important. I believe that we have to mobilize and unequivocally demand that the UN Human Rights in Geneva, the UN Human Rights Commission led the mapping exercise, producing the mapping report. We have to demand that they immediately release the names of the alleged perpetrators of the most serious crimes. Now, there are a few hundred of these names. Chief among them are senior commanders of Paul Kagame's army, some of the willing executioners who are behind this violence that started in 1996. That list of alleged perpetrators is still confidential, which is scandalous. So number one, we have to take steps to pressure the UN Human Rights Commission to release that report. And I just like to say that in 1994, after 1994, the early stages of the creation of the UN Tribunal to try crimes during the genocide, we saw the UN mobilize and other agencies issuing arrest warrants for alleged Hutu perpetrators of the genocide against Tutsis. We saw an incredible, almost bounty hunting exercise where people were tracked down and found, arrested, and certainly their names were made public. So we don't have a tribunal yet established, but we can certainly be able to do. We need to know who the alleged criminals are. And I would just like to say that it was shocking. Claude just mentioned James Kabarebe. It was shocking to me that Canada allowed James Kabarebe, who is one of those chief willing executioners who have authorized the killings of Congolese and Rwandan Hutu refugees. Canada invited him to a UN peacekeeping conference that was in part organized by Romeo Dallaire in 2017. This should stop. Second, as a practical measure, I think we need to mobilize this UN tribunal for the Congo, if it is established, is going to need a high standard of evidence in order to prove these crimes and prosecute these individuals. We need to organize efforts, American Bar Association, African organizations, Congolese victims, people who are interested in peace and justice in Congo, request under the Freedom of Information Act for satellite images that should be in fact declassified after 20 years, satellite images of those crimes being committed. Now, we know that there are around 50 military satellites that the Defense Ministry uses in the United States. We know they have access to things like Landsat, sophisticated satellites like Landsat, the Cannon Keyhole, that are able to provide evidence of fires, of burning, of disturbance of earth, of mass graves. We look at places like Lamera, Tingi Tingi, which Kambale spoke of, Biero, Kasese, Bandaka, all the areas where Rwandan Hutu refugees and Congolese were murdered, principally by Kagame's army. We need that evidence, and we can request the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, because that's the agency that can deliver that evidence. Thirdly, I would just like to say that Africans have to take the lead in these efforts to request for accountability. What we've seen is a lot of people in the West unknowingly or knowingly obfuscate efforts to inform the world about what's actually happening on the ground. I think we need to listen to the Congolese, to Rwandans who are in exile, but particularly for this tribunal and for justice efforts, to the Congolese, because it's people in Beni, in Ituri, and other places that are facing insurgency and also violence every day. They know what's happening. I don't think we need to listen to a cottage industry of white academic researchers whose research, quite frankly, is focusing on the local grievances and local ethnic problems as being the cause for some of the problems in Congo. I think the Congolese know exactly what has happened. They know who the principal instigators of the violence and the militias and the criminal network that exist today. And I think we need the lexicon to be created from Africans. We need Africans to control the narrative.
Powerfully said. Couldn't agree with you more. Next to Ni, one of the ones that it has been, helping to shape the narrative for a long time. Ni, we know you've been following so closely not only the U.S. but other Western forces and the role that they have played in destabilizing the Great Lakes region of Africa. So we turn to you to help us pull back the lens and talk about the complicity of these external forces and what needs to happen to hold them accountable as well.
Thank you so very much, Amira. Thank you, Africans Rising. I am particularly pleased to be on the same video program with, of course, I'm quite honored to be with Kambale, Judy, and Claude. Thank you again. Yes, let me just start with picking up what Judy just said. A country like the United States, which is where I have lived for some 50 years, a country, United States, has a lot of information and capability about what has happened in the Congo. So I support completely what Judy said, that Africans have to take the lead and their voices must be heard, and that we must not be sucked in by the cottage industry of Western researchers and university people, of which, I am in the university now, so I take the point that, look, we must listen to the Africans, we get things that they are seeing and hear them. That is absolutely correct. I welcome that. A corollary to that is that there are powerful countries in the world who have information on what has happened. But beyond that, which is where I want to focus, is that these powerful countries are the ones who protect the perpetrators. Kambale, Dr. Mukwege, we hear what he called for and it hasn't been done. Why? Because powerful countries are protecting the perpetrators in the Great Lakes. And not only are they protecting them, but they have built a media image of these people. I am now teaching at graduate school at the George Washington University, and I'm stunned every time I talk to my students who tell me, well, President Kagame in Rwanda is one of the exemplary leaders of Africa. And I say, okay, tell me why you think that. And what do you know of him? So the reason that is important is that if you look back at the Congo, the area of Africa, the heart of Africa, which we now call the Congo, the DRC, has gone through a lot of trauma, even before independence. As a little boy in Accra in 1966, I saw Patrice Lumumba with my own eyes, and within a few months, he had been butchered. So the people of the Congo have been subjected to a lot of violence. But why are we focused on what has happened more recently? Why are we looking at a mapping report around massacres like Tingi Tingi? Because in those waves of violence that our brothers and sisters have lost, millions have lost their lives in the Congo, this particular one where you've seen some 6 million, according to UN experts, 6 million people lost their lives, happened in the wake of the Rwandan Genocide. And so you have to link the two. As Judy mentioned, the RPF, what is now the Army of Rwanda, the army built and led by Paul Kagame, invaded Rwanda from Uganda, where they had helped Mr. Museveni bring himself to power after losing an election. He waged a war, Mr. Museveni did, and then he pushed the Rwandan who have helped him, Paul Kagame and his friends, out, and they invaded the country from which they come as refugees. And that started a war in 1990, and 1994, the genocide happened. And then what we are focused on, once Mr. Kagame had taken over Rwanda in 1994, he pursued a lot of people, and a lot of innocent people were killed. Once again, this is the 10th anniversary of the report, which was a UN project to say we need to shine a light on these atrocities. We need to know who were killed, who killed them, where they were killed, and how many. They had to push a lot to get that job done, to give us some numbers. And then, as has been mentioned, the US and others wanted those numbers kept hidden. And so you have to understand why we are in this situation, why this particular wave of violence swept over the Rwanda and the Congo. And the point is that you have the United States. Judy mentioned the country of which she is a citizen, Canada. I think we must not also forget the UK. And so for me to wrap up is just that Judy is right. We need Africans to take lead, but this includes Africans who are in the diaspora in the United States, in Canada, in Britain, and other citizens of these powerful countries, because they are protecting and shielding the governments that have perpetrated this violence, the governments that persuade these, protect these protesters, these perpetrators. And therefore, I will land here and turn it back to Amira, but in the Q&A, we hope to go into more details about what people in these powerful Western countries can do so they stop protecting those who are responsible for the deaths of millions of Africans. Let me repeat, millions of Africans have been killed, and the perpetrators are being protected, and that is unconscionable. And if you therefore live in one of these democratic countries, US, Canada, Britain, this is being done in your name.
Thank you so much, Nee. We will continue the conversation now on call to action. We've set the table. We know the context. What is it that we who are listening, people around the world, quite literally, including in Australia in the middle of the night, are with us, right? And they want to walk in solidarity and say, not on my watch. What is it that we want them to do? Let's start with you, Kambale, and then we will continue around the table.
Specific for Africans or the globe or anyone?
I would say let's take it for Africans, for the diaspora, and for people of conscious more.
I mean, the Congolese are united in the call for the creation of the tribunal. It seems as a big task or an abstract ask. A tribunal is a beginning for people to have a closure for what has happened to them. I remember the Nuremberg trial started, I think, a year after the World War II ended, right? So it was right after World War II. Imagine that Congo has been in conflict for over 2 decades, and the people on the daily basis are not getting justice. So creating the framework of having an existing tribunal is one. And the UN mapping exercise report provided models of how it could happen. And the one that the Congo supported is a creation of mixed chambers. And this chamber can look at what has happened in Sierra Leone. We can also look at the example of how Habre of Chad was tried by Africans, right? As a matter of having an independent court that cannot be tampered with either by national governments or international governments. So that's one. And Africans can do that wherever they are in the country by shaping the narrative of what is happening. Nia just shared how many Africans actually believe that Paul Kagame is an example to actually follow. And I've heard people say that he's a benevolent dictator. Tell that to the millions who have died, who are found in mass graves. They will not think that this is benevolence. Death is not benevolence. So Africans should educate themselves around what is happening there. And there are places where, I mean, the information is widely available. I always invite people to go to friendsofthecongo.org website to get information. There is a website called congojustice.org that also has information. When you have that information, allow others across the continent to know that, because it took few decades before Africans understood what was happening in South Africa during apartheid. The moment Africans understood that there were other Africans enslaved on their land, they took up that cause that you could end up in Senegal and a teacher in the beginning of school would write on a chalkboard, apartheid is crime against humanity in many remote areas. So that's what we need to do now, is to build a global movement, a continental movement where Africans are saying one death is no longer needed in Congo. We cannot accept that in 2020, that there is an African continent that continues to suffer and supports the call from the Congolese to have a tribunal created.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Judy. The mention of tribunal makes me think we should go to you next. What is your call to action? You mentioned the UN Human Rights Commission and the Human Rights Council and others, so please.
Thank you, Amira. The one thing I just like to say, I take Kambale's point. I think it's very important to dismantle and challenge that official narrative. I mean, Africa, he's going to hear every day how Kagame has brought order to Rwanda and to Central Africa. Nothing could be further from the truth. My book re-examines the Rwandan genocide. His legitimacy rests on a falsification of actual history. He did not stop killings, he instigated them. He actually fueled genocide against the Tutsis, and he committed genocide against Hutus. Then he unleashed his war in Congo. So counter it, dismantle it, and tell the truth. I think my work is always on evidence, and so I approach it through that prism. I do think that what's very interesting, what's happening now, is people are lobbying their members of Congress, but also their elected representatives. We've seen the European Parliament now being approached, individual members being approached by people who support Dr. Mukwege's work. They're asking the European Parliament and parliaments worldwide to put pressure on the UN Security Council, because this is the crux of the issue. The Security Council has to approve this this tribunal. And so lobby your elected officials. We need to do it in Canada. We need to do it across Africa, of course, certainly in Congo, but we need to do it in the United States, because the United States, as Nee mentioned, has sponsored these criminals, has protected them actively. So there's really a lot of work to be done, but it's within our reach, and this is practical work.
Thank you so much, Judy. Nee, we go to you. That lays it up very well. For those in the US, what should they be doing?
Yes, very, very much so. You know, we have the Congress, we have the Senate of 100 members, and they have a lot of influence and power. Judy just mentioned, you know, for the first step towards doing this, what Dr. Mukwege has called for, the UN Security Council. There are 5 members there that are permanent and who have a veto. So if they don't want anything to be done, it won't be done. And if they do want something to be done, they will push and it will be done. The US is one of them. And of course, everybody knows the UN is in the United States. So people in the United States, from African immigrants to people of African descent, of which there are 40 million, to a huge network of people of goodwill, Americans of goodwill, who I know for a fact support Africa and want the right thing done, want their government to do the right thing. They need to do a number of things, push their government to push for the UN to trigger these investigations, this tribunal that are being asked for. You have to push your members to do that. But you see, that will have to follow up by understanding that we have been lied to. It is that simple. Our vision, our understanding of what has been going on in the Great Lakes, where Paul Kagame has been painted as the exemplary African leader, where he has delivered services, he has done A, B, and C. He was trained in the United States. His son was trained in the United States. And here, so far, I'm emphasizing the government, and therefore what people must do as those of us who have elected the government and pay taxes. But in addition, support for Paul Kagame in the US goes beyond the US government. Foundations who think he's a great guy. I know businesses. I know universities that give him award, universities that invite him to come and speak as Africa's future. When I see that, it is unbelievable. So my point is, the second thing that people in the United States must do, maybe it even comes before pushing their government, is to educate themselves. The same thing that Judy has mentioned, the same thing that Kambale has mentioned. Please question the conventional wisdom. Double check whatever anybody, including us, tell you, because Mr. Kagame has been giving a false image. And I focus on him because the 7 million people that have been killed, you know, the Congo, for all of its difficulties in governance, have had elections that have been questioned, but they have changed leaders. Mr. Kagame has been in power since 1994. Don't let anyone tell you, as soon as the genocide was over, he was in charge. He's been in power. And of course, that ties to Mr. Rusesabagina. His real crime is that he has the nerve to say he wants change in Rwanda. And so educate ourselves here in the US, and we have democratic room to put pressure on our government to push for change to come to the Great Lakes, beginning with Rwanda. Thank you.
Thank you, Nee. And we'll add to that, make sure you're registered and vote. We're too close to a critical election to not emphasize that point. Claude,
precisely.
you. We turn to you now. Call to action. for those in the region, on the continent, in the diaspora, and elsewhere?
I think a lot of it has been covered, but let me start with us, Africans. We must tell our own story. And as has been said and repeated, we cannot let the Western academics and media lead the charge in telling our story. We must own our story. We must take our destiny in our own hands. And how do we do that? There's number one, we tell our own stories. Number two, when our brothers and sisters are telling their stories, we need to believe them versus, we have this tendency to think when a white person says something, it has more value than a Black person. We have these lived experiences. Listen to the lived experiences of the people. Let's act accordingly. When somebody tells you that a street is clean in Kigali, it's all nice. But when people are being cleaned off of it, that's your brothers and sisters that are being cleaned off of it. When somebody tells you that people are getting killed in the Congo, don't think it's simply just a Congolese issue when the neighbors are invading the country. Hold each other accountable. We are our brothers' keepers. We are our sisters' keepers. And we need to keep our brothers and sisters safe by making sure not only we recognize who these perpetrators are, but join the movement in terms of right now, everybody watching, most of you watching, you have social media. Spread the news. Let the world know. And this was my wish when I was digging my own grave. I knew I was gonna die, but I wanted the world to know. Let the world know what is happening to our sisters and brothers in the Congo and who's doing it. And then join Dr. Mukwege's call for the tribunals to be set up. If you don't know how, listen to what Kambale said. He provided the resources and how you can actually follow. This is for everybody around the world. This isn't just for Africans. This isn't just for us in the diaspora. This is the whole world. Inform yourselves. Let's follow the lead that Dr. Mukwege is pushing for. Let's push for these tribunals to be set up. Yes, it takes the UN Security Council, but guess what? Apartheid South Africa stayed and was perpetuated because people didn't know what was happening. When the world stood up and went against it, it changed. We also have the opportunity to make that change now in our lifetimes and have these tribunals set up. Yesterday's fight against apartheid in South Africa is today's fight for justice in the Great Lakes region of Africa. We must get rid of dictators. There is no good dictator. Benevolent dictators are not good. There is no good dictator. We've got to get rid of those guys. And we need to have the people who actually represent the people. And so if you are a taxpayer in a Western country, you must demand your government to stop supporting these dictators, especially military support. Dictators, and I'll name them. We've got Paul Kagame, we've got Yoweri Museveni. And by the way, the Congo today is hostage to dictator Joseph Kabila, who is also one of the perpetrators in this mapping report. They must be held accountable. They must actually serve time for the lives, the African lives that they took. And if you are a taxpayer, you must demand your government to stop the support. Use your social media to spread the news. And three, Africans, let's tell our stories. Let's own our own destiny. Let's let the world know what is happening to our people and bring them in to actually make this happen.
Thank you so much for the clarity of your calls to action, for your courage and dedication to justice. I want to just to underscore, when we say Black Lives Matter, that means whether it is in Missouri or in the DR Congo or in Rwanda, Black Lives Matter. And we must, as people committed to building a more healthy world, we must demand justice for all who have so brutally dehumanized, rendered invisible Black lives. So I can't thank all of you enough for using this space to elevate your voice. All of the organizations that have been a part of this convening are committed to raising the voice and amplifying the power of Black voices. From the Black Alliance for Peace, to the Friends of the Congo, to the Great Lakes Action Network, to Africans Rising, which started to create a platform for social movements on the continent and in the diaspora to elevate their voice in the calls for rights, for dignity, for justice, for peace. There could be no better place than joining these organizations, standing in solidarity together to push for the changes so needed, not only for the Democratic Republic of the Congo or Rwanda or the Great Lakes, but for the survival of this planet and the people on it. So we thank all of you who have already asked questions and gave comments. Keep them coming. We ask all of the presenters again to say what are those websites that people need to go to keep attuned on the activism around these issues. How can we demand that the UN, which puts out a report a decade ago, doesn't put that report on a shelf, but ensures that justice flows, accountability flows from the investigations that were evidenced in that report. So we join forces, we say change is possible. It feels tough right now in these challenging times, but it's possible. We've heard the examples of the anti-apartheid struggle raised with us today. We've heard those examples. We know colonialism was a hard-fought battle. It's still going on today, but victories have happened along the way. And we know that justice will be served if we all stand in solidarity together. So we call again for freedom, unconditional release of Paul Rusesabagina and all political prisoners that have been unjustly detained. We call for collective action and accountability through tribunals. We urge mixed chambers tribunals. I'm from Liberia, so in the case of Sierra Leone and Liberia, we have examples that have worked. Let's use those examples to work now for true justice to be served in the DR Congo, in the Great Lakes region, and beyond. So we ask all the presenters, please, say again, what are the websites? Where can people who are responding to the calls for action to stay connected? Please share those both on the chat and verbally so that those joining us on all the other platforms can also join beyond today to continue the actions that will flow from today. So we turn over to Kumba as our co-coordinator of Africans Rising to help us to navigate the Q&A in the multiple languages as she so beautifully can handle. And we ask everyone to stay tuned, stay woke, take action. Justice will be ours.
Thank you so much, Amira. I'm sitting here, you know, my eyes are watering as I listen to you and how beautifully you put this. I've been watching, you know, listening to you and mainly reading, you know, the comments and the question. And I know you've been looking at some of them also. A lot of comments are coming, thanking you for the work you are doing. Some comments are coming, you know, challenging and bringing the other narrative and defending and talking against you. Even challenging who you are as people and your own experience of life that you've shared here. I mean, the level of violence of that is unphantom. But there are also many questions that people are asking because there seems to be a real hunger for change to happen. And people, and I know you've touched some of these points already, maybe we need to come back to them. People are asking and they're wondering, the tribunal, is that the way? Will it work? How, you know, how do we make sure it's gonna be what we expect expected to be. People are also, really looking at trying to understand how did we get here? How does it work? The mechanism of controlling such narrative, like how can truth be buried so deeply that almost, I mean, you hear the opposite. I mean, Judy, you've been speaking about things and you've been discovering things. How come the opposite of reality becomes the narrative that most people hear about? People are trying to figure out how these things happen, and how does it work. We've got also several testimonies, of course, people who are refugees, people who live through some of these experiences, who also are sharing. I will come back to each of you to speak to some of the question. I will make, I think, the economy of some of these challenges, because I think as people that listen, everyone listen and read. When it makes sense, we know it. When questions are genuine, we also can feel it. So I would like you to take on, because today who we're trying to talk to are people that are ready to really help push this, get the truth out, engage Africans on the continent, in the diaspora, but also just people who believe in justice and want to see justice serve around the world, because we know that none of us really, is protected unless all of us are. So I'm gonna start again with the same round, with Claude, and I'll come through. Just Claude, pick, some of these questions that I just touched on, and let us know what your thoughts are. And I'll be listening to the YouTube people who are posing questions on Facebook and YouTube. I'm trying to get some of those questions also gathered and bring them here for Claude. Thank you.
Thank you, Kumba. I'll take on one of the questions, which is, are the tribunals the answer? And for me, it's an emphatic yes. The reason we have had the cycles of violence in the Great Lakes region, whether it's the region at large or each country by itself, it's because of the long-running culture of impunity. We have perpetrators that basically get away with killing millions of our people. And then they turn around and they enjoy impunity. Nobody pursues them. The victims and the survivors are made to be silent. They are smeared. They are actually tortured. Example, we're talking about somebody like Paul Rusesabagina, who helped shelter people during the genocide. There's multiple genocide survivors from Rwanda. Let me name a couple. There's Deo Mushahidi. He's serving life in prison for the same crime that basically Paul Rusesabagina has committed, which is criticizing Kagame. And there's also the late gospel singer Kizito Mihigo, very beloved in Rwanda, not very well known outside of the country, but very beloved in Rwanda. In fact, he just won a human rights award because he was killed for speaking up and telling the truth, another genocide survivor. So you have the perpetrators enjoying impunity over and over again inside each one of these countries and outside of the countries, wherever they're committing the atrocities. And as long as we allow impunity to last in the region, you've got Kabila, who was the president of Congo, who was a part of the massacres committed and documented in the mapping report, enjoying impunity today. You have multiple warlords who have now become either wealthy or powerful inside of these countries, who all need to be held accountable. And as long as we don't hold them accountable, there will be somebody else who has the ambition to go and kill and get away with it. And so, yes, the tribunals are the solution. They must be tried, and the victims must see them walked away in handcuffs to go spend time in prison thinking about the millions of lives that they've taken.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Claude. We'll come back to you. There are more questions for you in the Q&A. I'll come to about just this manufacturing of, I want to say, of information and of what people should believe. How does it happen?
Well, it's like, I think of the propaganda model from Noam Chomsky and manufacturing consent for this kind of aggression that's happened in Central Africa. Just briefly, it's really important what you're saying, Kumba. I'm glad you asked me to speak on this. We can't ever forget that the narrative of the Rwandan genocide was used as an excuse, or our understanding of what happened then, and the propaganda resulting from that was then used to justify the invasion of Congo and the evisceration of that nation. So let me just step back a bit. The Rwandan genocide narrative, which stipulates that Kagame saved the Rwandan people, he stopped the genocide, and then basically created peace there and stability afterwards in Central Africa, was forged in a climate of violence and propaganda. So in other words, they used enormous propaganda, infiltrating NGOs, infiltrating human rights organizations, that sort of thing. And they controlled the narrative through violence. How do you do that? Claude just touched on this. You attack or you target witnesses. You scare them, you silence them, you kill them. And not only did they do that before, during, and in the aftermath, as the dust was rising, as you know, in the ashes of the Rwandan genocide, but then when Paul Kagame's troops invaded Congo, they attacked and killed Congolese priests. And we know that religious figures in Congo have been at the forefront of protecting the Congolese during these waves of invasions and during the massacres. They have been on the front lines. They have been contextual and direct witnesses to these, and those people have been targeted first. White fathers, the Congolese Catholic priests. So we live in this environment. I would suggest that everyone has to be very much aware ahead of the creation of a tribunal to protect witnesses, to close ranks around them, and as Claude said, gather up your testimonies, talk publicly, but document the crimes that people have been subjected to. So it's going to require formidable efforts, but we have to realize the lies that have been created, or the propaganda especially, and then we have to tell our stories, document them, and make sure that we gather enough tangible material evidence of what we're talking about. And it's very, very important that local administrative officials throughout Congo, we ensure that they are not infiltrated and they are not persuaded or threatened. They have to open up their communities, protect the victims and families of people who have lost their loved ones. They have to open up their territory to show, where the mass graves occurred. All of that is essential. There are people who worked with the UN investigative team, the 50-member investigative team, who put the mapping report together. There are people who were targeted during and after that essential investigation. I know of one person who was killed. We can't let this happen. We have to protect the witnesses of these crimes, and the only way we can do that is to demand it and to expose what really happened. And we have to create a website or put it on the websites that already exist, all the witnesses, the courageous people, the whistleblowers who have been targeted and who have been killed for raising their voices and exposing the perpetrators.
And Kumba, this is Nee, if you will forgive my
Yes.
jumping the line, but
Thank
I
you.
think I want to add to how the truth gets turned on its head.
Yeah.
I think it is something that is very arresting. I have watched it in decades of living in the US. It's astonishing, and I think we need to understand it in general, but in particular with regard to the Great Lakes and with regard to Mr. Kagame, who so many people think is an exemplary leader, when he's the opposite. He has done things that have led to the deaths of millions of Africans, okay? An African head of state whose actions have led directly to the deaths of millions of Africans. I think that is so horrendous in and of itself. And when you take such a person and persuade a lot of people in the world, in Africa, in Europe, in North America, to say to them, this is exemplary African leader. Every time I hear that, it makes my skin crawl. So I think we need to understand how this propaganda was manufactured. The first thing is that if you are looking at just the United States, they have a long record of picking African dictators who are willing to do what they want. In the case of South Africa, apartheid that we have been talking about, they actually supported the white racist government in South Africa for hundreds of years. Not apartheid just was the name given in 1948. Before that, there had been white rule and oppression of Black people. The United States supported them all the way. The United States government supported them all the way. So they have a habit of doing that. Their own diplomats actually have a term they call friendly tyrants. Okay, tyrants who are friendly to us. As Claude mentioned, no dictator is benevolent. Okay, from the point of view of a big country like the US, yeah, we like to work with people who have a tight grip on their country so long as they do what we tell them.
Yep.
That's what they want. So this is in that vein, but we are talking about how the propaganda gets manufactured. So here is the other side of it. The media, the mainstream media, even major newspapers and respected publications like The Economist, Financial Times, Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, they call themselves the best newspapers and media in the world. You know what they do? Here in the US, they will challenge the government. Overseas, if it is an African story, they will not challenge the government because they want the government to tell them, okay, we have intelligence, here's the story you should write, and they are afraid to cross the government because they say, well, okay, if we cross them, they have an African story, they won't talk to us. Even the best newspapers, we have 1.2 billion people on our continent. The major newspapers, they will have at most 3 journalists. Okay, you take a major American newspaper and it has more journalists in London than it have on the whole continent of Africa. So they just depend, and when they go to cover stories, as Judy was mentioning, you know, you want to hear what the people on the ground say. No, they go to their embassies and talk to their press attaches and the embassies, then they'll call back to Washington and talk to officials, even though the story is supposed to be about Africa. So what happens is they follow the government's narrative. And as I am saying, the government decides, okay, Mr. Kagame is our guy. He's doing what we want. We are going to support and protect him. This is how this truth has been, this propaganda has been manufactured. So we need, thank God for social media. Thank God for instruments that allow Africans to tell their story. But the propaganda was manufactured by these powerful governments picking African dictators as their puppets. You do what we want, we keep you in power. And
thank you.
we make our papers cover what we tell them to cover. This is how that narrative gets created, perpetrated, and it has to be shut.
Thank you so much, Ni, for pointing to that, both Judy and you. And definitely, even as we are on this Zoom, we are seeing what type of attack, can people get, when they start speaking the truth and the violence of it, directed at this point even to Claude. But I'll move to Kambale. There are many so that I think you can take on. I have noted people have been talking about the mining companies and their roles in all this. People are asking about the politics in the Congo itself, the regime change, the government of the Congo, and all that. Maybe you can give, maybe not all answers, but at least your perspective on how all of this fit in this story. We remind people that what we are looking for, why we are having this panel, is just about unearthing the truth, is about making justice a reality. So it doesn't mean you have to just listen to those who are here, who are talking. Do also your own research. What we are saying is open your mind and don't just stay focused on what you hear, but challenge the narratives that you hear, and hold people accountable. Your university, hold it accountable when they bring on your campus people that are, perpetrator of crimes, wherever those crimes doesn't matter. If you are from a foundation or an organization that is caritative, check it, challenge, ask the questions. And of course, you are a citizen somewhere, voting somewhere, challenge your own government, your tax, where is it going? Get the information. Don't sit and say, I didn't know. Kambale, thank you for guiding us in some of these questions.
Definitely. I think the framing also needs to be in understanding why we are even talking about the UN mapping exercise report. And for any detractor, is exposing them that they will not be supportive of a call for justice, no matter what you believe, right? Dr. Mukwege makes a Nobel Peace Prize speech in 2018 and says that the most important thing for Congo to be stable is justice. I'm surprised. Who says that he stopped the genocide will not support justice for Congo? Because he had a tribunal in Rwanda. So he should be the first one to say, yes, there was a tribunal in Rwanda. Congolese are calling for justice in the Congo. Me, Paul Kagame, I will support the call for the International Tribunal for Congo because I saw how justice was served in Rwanda. But that's not what he's doing. And that's also what many nations have not been doing. So when what people say and the critique of the detractors, they're forgetting what the call is for. Congolese are calling for justice. If Congolese are calling for justice, any human being who believe in human dignity, peace, will support a call for justice. That's one framing. The second one is, even as we discuss, it's not even a question of having a tribunal today to prove that these crimes have been committed in the DRC. In 2005, the International Court of Justice gave a judgment where they stated that you owe Congo $10 billion of reparations for crimes they committed in the Congo. The ICJ somehow in 2005 believed the evidence that the Congolese brought to the court. Of course, Congo also took Rwanda to that court. Do you know why the case was kicked out of the court? The only reason why the court did not listen to the case of the Congo at the International Court of Justice is because Rwanda, just as the United States, have never signed the Rome Treaty. So this is why you cannot try American soldiers who have killed and raped Iraqis. This is the same thing for they never signed the Rome Treaty, so you can never take them there for that. So we already had a case That's never been concluded because of that. But for the case of Uganda, Uganda today owes Congo $10 billion of reparation, and we're still waiting for that. There is another discussion around if we should go to the ICC and so on. I saw a question around, follow the example of what the Central African did with the Mbemba case. I want to remind the listeners, last month, I was shocked to watch a reportage, I believe it was done by TV5, where the Congolese government sent an envoy, a peace envoy, to the northeast Congo in the Ituri region. And the peace envoy included someone named Germain Katanga. Germain Katanga was found guilty at the International Criminal Court. He was sentenced to prison. His prison sentence was commuted to the Makala prison in Kinshasa. And me last month watching, I'm seeing a former rebel who had his sentence commuted to the Makala prison in the Congo with Congolese military uniform, negotiating with a rebel group called Codeco. So I am not crazy to say that Paul Kagame, Joseph Kabila, or Museveni should go to the ICC, because I wouldn't want 5 years after that to see them running around in Mali. This is why I support the African courts. The model that was used to try Habre is a model that Congolese should look at. And they have actually supported that. And this example of what we should do and others is beyond what's needed, because the UN mapping exercise report is very clear on the process. They gave many examples of transitional justice that Congolese people can support. And the Congolese civil society in mass have already said, in all those examples that you have provided, we support the mixed chambers. Now, how then do we achieve that? What are the levers? All of us have shared many levels. For those in the United States, it's simple. I always go with Public Law 109456. Barack Obama, as a senator, wrote a law signed by George Bush. This law in section 105 says that the US Secretary has the power to withhold aid to any nation destabilizing the Congo. The evidence exists, but the United States military, the United States government, continue to fund the nations destabilizing the Congo against their own law. So for an American listening to this, what am I going to do? Well, when you contact your legislator, it's not a question of a moral right for justice. There is already a law that exists. So when you're contacting your Congress people and others, you're saying, I'm not coming to you because I'm appealing to your conscience. I'm saying that we actually have a law that we are breaking, that we continue to send Rwandan troops in Central African Republic, in Mali, in Sudan, in South Sudan. You had Ugandan soldiers in Iraq, in Afghanistan. I was speaking with comrades from Haiti. They're telling me that Rwandan troops are in Haiti. And I'm wondering, what are they doing in Haiti, right? How are all of this happening? So against, I don't know if people know, Rwandan generals have international arrest warrants from the Spanish Coup, 40 of them. And these generals include James Kabarebe, who threatened Paul Kagame. I'm sorry, he did not threaten Paul Kagame. I wish one they will do. But James Kabarebe, who is a Rwandan military officer, who till today, I do not know which country he's from. In 1997, he became the Congolese Army Chief of Staff. Later, he became the Rwandan Minister of Defense. Right now, he's a military advisor to the Rwandan president. And you wonder, this is a rebel without switch side anytime. But James Kabarebe is on the arrest warrant, and many others, the Jack Ziza and others. But these guys continue to fly on flight, right? They fly away. They don't get arrested like Paul Rusesabagina was kidnapped in Dubai. And all these nations are bringing them. So knowing actually what is happening, putting pressure in your nations, providing the proper narrative is going to help Congolese already tactics on the ground that we can use on the US, as I mentioned. And on the African side, it is an embarrassment to the African Union that the African Union is not at the forefront of this issue. The African Union should say that if Congolese who are members of the African Union, and the Article 2 of the Charte Africaine says that Africans have the right to self-determination, and Congolese have that right. They've been fighting for self-determination, and they are now, right now, calling for the International Tribunal for Congo. They have yet say a word around the UN mapping exercise report and the implementation of it. Africans on the continent shouldn't question that. What is this institution? Is it a club of dictators, as it's been labeled lately, or an institution where its founding members, Kwame Nkrumah and the Nasser, who believe a united Africa, believe that no African should live without dignity, that we must come together to transform the continent. We should put pressure on the African Union, because if Congo is able to get justice through the tribunal, there is opportunity for transformation in DRC. And if DRC is liberated and has a form of justice that the people feel that they can come to a closure, we can transform the entire continent because of its potential. And I come to the last point, when people are talking about the role of the mining corporations. And that's what we as Africans have to see. I've always shared with any African is what's happening in the Congo could happen in any other African country. You can study the Congo, study the tactics, and you start seeing, oh, what happened in Libya? You start going around different nations that have struggles, right? That is paramount for us to stop. While our African brothers are being given these guns and weapons to come and destroy our land, our minerals are living in billions out of the continent, and you do not see these corporations listed. This is why I support the International Tribunal for Congo per the recommendation of the mapping exercise report, because they want not just the individuals to be held accountable, also the corporations that benefited during the conflict, that they should pay reparations to the Congolese for the coltan that they got to put on their cell phones, for the cobalt they are now using into the Tesla vehicles, and so on. And that's why we must have an international tribunal for DRC, and reparation is the word of the day.
Thank you so much, Kambale. I'm coming back to Nii, and please unmute. But again, I know you've been at this work for a long time, and you've watched some of this in the Q&A in the web chat. We cannot hear you very well, but what are your answers to some of those, to some of those questions? People are talking about, roles of government. I know you've been really pushing for people to challenge their government. But yes, please.
Can you hear me better now, I hope?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. And of course, I'm so proud of my fellow panelists. Here they say truth in advertising. I think people should know that on this panel is a friend that I admire very much. And I say that because I want to give even special commendation for where Kambale just finished. We won the tribunal. The millions of Africans who have did that. But in addition, he mentioned the reason it's being done, and the reason that other African countries need to pay attention and take lessons and be in solidarity with people in the Great Lakes, in the Congo. It is being done to control and to extract and to steal African wealth, the natural resources. And the reason that just grabbed me is this very month, the United Nations Trade and UNCTAD, the UN Trade Agency, has just come out with another one of a report on what is called illicit financial flows. I call it how Africa's resources get stolen. They've just put this name on it, illicit flows. About 5 years ago, the African Union had former President Thabo Mbeki do a study to see how much of our wealth is stolen. He came up with a number of about 60 billion a year. 2 years before that, the UN itself had done it through the UN Economic Commission for Africa. They also came up with about 50 billion a year. Thabo Mbeki panel measured it at about 60. This month, UNCTAD has come out and said it is now at 90 billion a year. B with a billion, 90 billion United States dollars is being stolen from our continent through minerals extraction and under invoicing every year. That report just came out this month, September 2020. So I'm saying the point that Kambale made, a lot of these killings are being done because they want to steal our resources. But we must remember the history. They have been stealing our resources for 500 years. Okay, 400 years. For the United States, 400 years since Black people were brought to this area as enslaved. And they have not stopped. You take the people, you take the resources, you colonize the continent. When Africans snatch back their independence, you come in and you use so-called friendly tyrants and warlords, and you give them arms to kill millions of other Africans, and then you want to hide the story, so you don't want the story to be told. So other Africans and in other areas of the continent need to pay attention. This is not just an issue for the Congolese. This is what I want to stress. It is our issue for all of us, even Africans outside the continent. And here, of course, I'll talk to my fellow Africans in the United States. One concrete thing that we could do, we have missed so many opportunities. And Kuba, as you said, I've been at this forever. And it breaks my heart at how many opportunities we have lost. If we have united, if we had formed one core like Africans Rising, if we had formed it 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you know, it's exactly 30 years ago when I shook Nelson Mandela's hand in Washington, D.C. And the next year I thought, okay, South Africa is moving in the right direction. We need to do the same thing for the whole entire continent. But it starts with us coming together and speaking with one voice. So this is part of the major call for arms, that we need to unite and get our voices heard. If we were well united, the United States is voting next month. In 1 month, they are voting. What is the Africa that are being shown by both sides? Because our voices have not been strong enough, those policies will not be strong. So let me emphasize again, this is an issue for the whole continent, for all Africans on the continent and outside. And here in the United States, one of the other things we can do is we have to come together so our voice is so strong that it's not just listened to, it is feared. I want it so strong that they fear what we say and what we demand.
Yeah, and me, I'll push you a little more. There's a question there, and somebody's asking, about the coming up election in the U.S. and
yes,
what the outcome of that. Does it do anything for us, for this tribunal that we are pushing for, etc.? Somebody's trying to see the link.
Yeah, yes, I think because maybe given my long track record of this, I'm a little bit jaded. So I've realized that sometimes in elections you have two choices, neither of which is perfect. You go for the one that is better, the lesser of two evils, okay? And when you look at the record for as long as I have lived here, even before I got to this country, I had a certain view of the two political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. you live here and you look at all the policies that have come through from the anti-apartheid movement in the 80 years later. And to me, you see a clear pattern. To me, it is no accident that Black voters in the United States, people of African descent in the United States, they used to vote massively for Republicans when Black men first got the vote, okay? I'm not a historian, but they first got the vote in the 1860s. And they voted massively for the Republicans. Today, they vote 90% for the Democrats. Because if you look at the policies that they follow, if you look at even the makeup of the party, to me, it is clear that the Democrats have a more pro-Africa policy, at least in how who they bring into their tent and the issues that they looked at. And so for me, it is quite clear. They are nowhere near perfect, but I think they are the better option. And then it must not stop there. You have to push them. I was very proud, like practically every Black person I know when Mr. Obama was in power for 8 years. But we always said we love him, but in America, you don't get good policy from a politician unless and until you push him. You have to push him hard. He himself gave speeches that made me say, oh my goodness, he is saying we need to push him. So yes, US elections are coming. I think you have to look at what they are saying about Africa, and you have to vote the right way. But whoever is elected, we have to shift gears and ramp up the pressure on them rather than say, oh, the elections is over, our work is done. No, once the election is done, our work actually should intensify.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to just come back to, Claude. I know you are sitting up there. Yes, there are comments and questions attacking you, but in many ways, I didn't want to put that on you. You really don't have to answer them. I think this is a place where all of us need to answer, and especially, I'd rather even have some other people speak to those questions. And some people are saying Claude is not who he say he is. That he and like you can stand here and talk about who you are, and if you want to speak to it, I'll leave you the floor to do it. But as a moderator, I just feel like this is not on you to be the one speaking to some of those attacks. I mean, we are not here for that. Again, I want to bring back that we're trying to make use of this time to really make sure people understand, because there are people who are having here genuine questions. They're really wondering, like, what can we do? The African Union, will be headed by DRC. So what can a Pan-African organization do to make sure that some of these things that Kamale has been speaking about, the challenges to say, where are the questions, what about, those are the things that we really want to do. But feel free to respond to what you want, and I'd like to go back to Kambale and Judy before our time ends.
Yeah, well, we can skip the questions about who I am, because I don't think that's that important. My story has been public for over 20 years, and the only people who challenge my story are the ones who want to speak up for the perpetrators. So I'm not too worried about those who want to try to smear or paint me as something that I'm not. And I think it really looks, to be honest, it's foolish for anybody to come out and start denying other people's story. But in any case, for me, I think a Pan-African organization, as I said before, should take the charge in Africans taking our destiny in our own hands, meaning forums like this. Right now we're online, but we also need to do some work offline, because there's a lot of people on the continent who do not have access to all of this technology. We've got to be in the community, sharing this information, letting the people know And we also have to, I really believe in direct and disruptive action, where if there's a need or when there's an opportunity, or we create the opportunities, we go out and we protest. You know, there was all this one against apartheid in South Africa, disrupt the system. We've got to also come up with ways to actually economically impact those who are committing the atrocities and those who are supporting those committing the atrocities. And that includes eventually organizing around boycotts. We must boycott those who are causing and contributing to the death of millions of our people. And so for me, I think eventually I get to where we do something like divest for Congo, divest for justice, you know, boycott for justice, boycott for Congo. I think that is where we need to go as far as the Pan-Africans that we are, and take all of it from the hands of those who are actually perpetrating these crimes. And we get it done ourselves. And we have, Africa is the youngest continent in terms of age. So a lot of potential. Congo itself has great potential, not only to feed the continent, but to provide things like basics like electricity and other things that if the Congo is free, Africa is free. This is not the first time you've heard this, I'm sure, for those of you on the panel or those many of you who are following. If Congo is free, Africa will be free. We need to really put a lot of work into direct action, educating the people on the ground to make sure that a lot of the misinformation, again, denying my story is part of the misinformation, to try to discredit the messenger because the message is inconvenient. But guess what? The method is so much more important than the messenger. The message is more important also than the method. We must use every method available to make sure that this message is heard, and also that we take action, direct, that we do the boycotting. And so that will be the next phase. The next time we have these large panels, we've got to not only push for the setup of this tribunal, but push for a boycotting of those leaders, African misleaders and Western misleaders who are subjecting Africans to this, not even slow death, but really fast death. You know, 3 million children is way too many. Let no other Congolese be killed at the hands of these same perpetrators.
Thank you. Thank you, Claude. I'll come back to you, Judy, and then to Kambale. We're moving fastly to the end of this conversation. I encourage you to read some of the questions and make sure you pick some that you don't want to miss. I know there are more and more comments that people are making. We are still on action because a lot of people are listening from very different places. And the first step is knowing, the information, knowing where do people go. Of course, please tell us about the sources. Where do people go to get not only the information, but the action that they must take, the organizations and the group that they must join. We need to hear more about those things before we end this call. Kambale and then Judy.
I mean, in terms of places to get information, I will continue to share is Friends of Congo.org, CongoJustice.org, and stay engaged. Like right now, this event is part of the launching of Congo Week. Yes. Congo Week being a global campaign that started since 2008, where people take action every third week of October in the communities to lift up the stories of the Congolese people. So hopefully, people who have joined this call will go to CongoWeek.org and sign up so that on the third week of October, they can engage more with us and make sure that we have a tribunal. The point I want to make from the question is, Daniel, if I'm not mistaken, Ni was there, Ni, Claude, Jacques Bahati, Emira, and others. We had a panel, a briefing on Capitol Hill in the United States. Many things happened in that event. The thing that marked me a lot was there was a guy who was in the room. He said his name was Tom Dahiro, a journalist. And I looked at him. The guy is built like a military, like a soldier. He's so big. And he said he's a military guy. And he asked a question in the room. He said he's a journalist. So he asked a question in the room, of course, to disrupt the event. I can't remember what the answer was. What was the question? But what I remember is at the end of the event, this guy came violently to the podium, literally attacking Claude, and he was speaking Kinyarwanda. And all I could hear Claude say was, say it in English so everybody can hear. And I kept asking myself, what was he saying? And there were people who came and pulled him. I mean, the guy is gigantic. So he already looked like a military guy to me. I knew that he's not a journalist. So I asked Claude, what did he say? And the guy was pretty much threatening him, saying that his story is not true. And later I find that he's actually a soldier from the Rwandan Patriotic Front, right? A Rwandan soldier shows up at an event pretending to be a journalist, challenging Rwandans who are standing for justice in Rwanda and justice in Congo. Those are the dangers that whistleblowers and justice seekers face. And that goes to it, that came from Sophie Newman. She's a journalist writing on the Great Lakes. And she wanted to know what is happening to Dr. Mukwege. Because Dr. Mukwege, I don't speak Kinyarwanda. I saw a video circulating of a Rwandan general named James Kabarebe speaking in Kinyarwanda and mentioning Mukwege. The moment I heard, I got worried because I know the story of Kabarebe, because Kabarebe killed civilians in Tingi-Tingi, in Mbandaka, in Kitona, in Kinshasa. Many Congolese have died because of him. And he's one of the soldiers that committed many crimes there. So for him to mention Dr. Mukwege in a TV interview in a TV station in Rwanda was already an alarm for all of us. And when we heard the translation of what he was saying, literally threatening a Nobel Peace Prize, who is calling for justice. That is what journalists also should focus on, because they want to know what can journalists do to expose the lies that there are right now. For the past 2 decades, many journalists and officials cannot say they don't know what's happening in the Congo. It's the ordinary people who do not have the information. So it's the responsibility of journalists, especially those who are on this panel listening in, to say your contribution to peace and stability in Congo, your contribution to justice in the Congo, is to share a just story of the Congolese and the people of the Great Lakes, where we know that since 1996, over 6 million Congolese have died, and half of them are children under the age of 5. And the world is silent. And those who are standing up against it, sometimes are faced by their own government, because the government right now, the government of the Congo, has many people who participated in the crimes, are benefited from those crimes. The government in the neighboring countries are also the same when we look at Rwanda and Uganda. So it will require all of us. There is no small action. You should never feel like there is nothing to do. And the part where I have a slight different opinion, I think more of Dr. Martin Luther King. He wasn't a Democrat or a Republican. What he believed in, right, was the freedom and liberation and human dignity of his people. So I'm worried because in 2008, I was also caught in the Obama wave. I campaigned for him, but it surprised me. The UN report that we are speaking about was published in 2010. Who was the president? Barack Obama. Who was the Secretary of State? Hillary Clinton. What did they do with that report? They blocked it. Susan Rice was the ambassador. We mobilized, Susan Rice was the ambassador to the United Nations, the US ambassador to the United Nations. We mobilized so much to expose that controversy. that the first Black president, when a report has been published saying that there is possible genocide in the Congo, his administration shelved the report. So the same thing can be true, that I look at US political party more from the perspective that their foreign policy when it comes to Africa has never been in the interest of Africa. But we have to use all the tactics available, right? Just as we did with apartheid, we had Republican president, Democratic president, and so on and so forth, that we say no matter who is in the White House, no matter which political party is there, we cannot fall asleep because this president, Barack Obama, can sing at the Apollo. That we must hold him accountable. We must hold Trump accountable, and whoever wins this election, no matter if it's Trump or Biden,
Right.
or of course, it's not the only ones running. So I always make the mistake saying Trump or Biden. There are others also who are running. No matter who gets into that, we must mobilize for peace. But the action, if Biden wins, that's my call. Let's make sure that Suzerain has no office whatsoever in the administration of that, because she worries me a lot of the policies that she implemented, supporting Meles Zenawi in Ethiopia, supporting Paul Kagame or Rwanda, supporting Museveni or Uganda. That would be devastating. But we as Africans, as we use tactics to get our voice heard, we must continue to mobilize also on our continent, because we also have our brothers in Kenya who are involved in gold trade in DRC. We still are worrying about the diamond that Zimbabwe took also from DRC during the war. It was called Africa's war, so many were involved. So each African must look at it and say, Congolese are calling for tribunal for Congo. If they get justice, then they can be free and allow the continent to move forward.
Thank you, Kambale. It is justice that would really free all of us. We are really getting to the end. Judy, just few words to the end before we close.
Thank you, Tumba. I just would like to say I agree with Kambale. Let us recall that it was during the Democratic administration under Bill Clinton that the United States helped regime change in the heart of Africa. In 1996, 1997, the Democrats supported Kagame's invasion, assisted him militarily and with satellite communications, protected him as his troops were killing the Congolese and Rwandan Hutu refugees. They wanted to topple Mobutu. They wanted regime change, opening up the corridor of natural resources, because copper and cobalt production had decreased significantly in the late 80s, early 90s. They wanted a vast restructuring of that region. So we can't count on Democrats to act in good faith here. I also wanted to come back to Kambale's point about the Rwandan presence in international peacekeeping. You mentioned they were in Haiti, they're in Sudan, they're now in the Sahel of Africa, helping. They're very crucial for the United States in waging a war against terror in the Sahel. And so many people feel that this is masking another attempt to gather rare earth minerals in that area. So the Rwandans are very beneficial to the United States peacekeeping operations at the level of the UN. And that is the principal reason, one of the principal reasons the mapping report never, that it got shelved and we never saw the creation of a tribunal, because the Rwandan government blackmailed and said, you want to release this report, it will be released. But we are your principal people providing the third most, strongest presence at the UN, providing you peacekeepers for the war on terror. Was the blackmail that was very effective in dismantling efforts to create the tribunal. We have to talk about these things. We have to talk about the geopolitics. it's important that people like Kambale, Friends of the Congo, and Claude Gadabuke be in charge of knowledge production and expose some of these scandals, pressure the UN, and talk about, make sure politicians and people in powerful places stories, embarrass elected officials or UN officials over all the evidence that has been buried, all the politicking, all the diversion tactics. So yeah, I think again, these are all things that have to be raised.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Claude. Thank you, Kambale. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Ni. Thank you for all of the knowledge, the information you've shared. And thank you for everyday action and sacrifice to make sure that we live in a world of justice. I thank everyone who joined us. We had about 119 people on this platform on the Zoom. I don't know how many on the Facebook Live, but somebody said it earlier. We need to tell our stories. We have stories. We have also channels to tell them. It is extremely hard in these days to bury truth. When it took what took 20 years to surface, or now will take less than months to come up. As much as it's buried down, as much as narratives are built, it is becoming harder and harder to hide. Kambale mentions criminals flying around the world. We need to make sure that people hear and know that there will come a day when this will not be possible. There was a time when people did crimes and got away with it. Those times are gone. As we move into the future, it's going to be more and more difficult to hide. People will have to respond. People will have to pay. And we have more and more conversation coming. Stay tuned. Congo Week, already on the 19th, we have a whole conversation on reparation. I know some people have asked some of those questions here. We didn't touch even that, but what should we do? And we're having, people who, like the author of King Leopold Ghost, Adam Hochschild, Princess Esmeralda, Michael Ekren, Patricia Servan, that will be also on a panel and will specifically talk about what we call rewriting history. Ni said it earlier, it didn't start today. What is happening to the Congo didn't start today, hundreds of years ago already. And it's the same principle, it's the same greed, it is racism that fuels what is going on to the Congo today. So we will continue having this conversation. We will dig deep into the roots of why our lives are not considered. We will go back to the roots of it, to uproot it so that we can live in peace, in justice, and in dignity with everyone else in the world. Thank you for your support, for your work, for everything you're doing every day. And see you very, very soon. I thank our interpreters, the technology people. I know you struggled in the beginning. Thank you for helping us and making this possible. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to Emira. We're missing her. We're missing her. Thank you very much. Goodbye.